This video is a call flow in the offer follow-up video to the basic flow video that I made before. In that video I showed you what we created on when you do the wizard to set up the offer and how you could add a basic greeting to it and what's going on here. Now this video is going to be very detailed about all the features that we have to control what's going on as the call happens. So what I had before for a greeting is I said press 1 to be connected to next available agent. I was talking it. I was doing text to speech. I repeated it twice. So normally, in my opinion, I like to hang up on computers when I call a company and a computer's answering in a very choppy computer voice. Text to speech is never quite good. So I always try to have the recordings made professionally. I used a company called Voice Bunny, just voicebunny.com. Typically you put in 3 actors to audition. You put in a little sample of what you want to be made. 3 actors audition. You pick the one you want and they'll finish out the rest of your greeting and token prompts and all those things, so they're all in the same voice. But they sound like a radio, so it's very good. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the greeting. And I have this greeting I made back in 2013. So this greeting here actually says press 1. The options are when you press 1 you're going to get routed to an agent. 2 is for a new student loan, and 9 is if you were trying to contact the Department of Education. Now I find if you have a greeting that says if you're looking for an agent press 1, for any other reason press 2, for example, and they press 2 and you just blow them off, let's say it was a tax debt offer, they're going to call back, press 1, get forwarded to your client, your buyer, or your agents, and they're simply going to ask, do you know what the IRS's phone number is? So what I like to do is I give them a way to get out of the offer, and if there's a common phone number I can tell them to call, like the IRS for tax debt or the Department of Education for student loan consolidation, I'll just give them that phone number so they're not calling back to the offer to press 1 to get an agent to give them that information. So this greeting here does have press 1, press 2, and press 9. So I'm going to go ahead and add when they do press 2, what are we going to do? And then I'm also going to add in the press 9. Okay, so those 2 things are there. So now I need to tell the system what do I want you to do when the consumer presses 2. In this, I could just play an audio, choose a file, and I'm going to play the greeting I had set up for press 2 that says, I'm sorry, we don't do new student loans. So we're just going to say that to the consumer and then hang up. Okay, another option could be that later on I actually do have new student loans in another offer. And in that situation, I might say nothing to the consumer, forward the call to a different offer, and I'm going to pick the new student loan offer. So this call came in when I was trying to advertise for student loan consolidation. However, based on the key presses, this consumer is better fit for a different offer, so I'm going to forward it over to the other offer. And then when 9 is pressed, I'm going to go ahead and play the audio, and I have a key press 9. And basically what this key press 9 I did was say that all we do is consolidate loans. If you're looking for the Department of Education, hang up and call this toll-free number. So they get the number from me and then hang up on them. So I'm going to leave this as if we're going to forward it to the new offer, but you could either be hanging up on them and telling them something. What's nice about this is maybe you do have a new student loan offer now, and so when they press 2 you're going to forward it that way. Then you lose all those buyers, and you don't want to change your IVR and all that stuff, so you could still put back in changes back to play an audio file and then hang up on them when they press 2. So very flexible there. Now the other thing that I talked about on the first very short video was how the call flow goes. So they press 1 to get through, and they're going to come down here. Now the buyer that has filters, there's some filters that are static, so like the call type of search and the geo of not equal to Illinois and not equal to New York is listed there. If those 2 things don't fit, this buyer wouldn't even be considered or lined up in the queue as people that could take the calls on this particular call. If they fit, he'll be sorted up. And then the other prompts, the other 2 tokens there, the federal debt amount and what type of debt you have, are both promptable tokens. So we're going to stop and ask the consumer, what is your situation on your debt amount, and what's your situation on the type of debt you have? And you could have other tokens. Are you employed? Yes or no? Are you still in school? Those are all things you can add. The way our call flow works is we have a simple greeting in the offer, but if you've ever seen how IVR flows work on most phone systems, you have a triangle or a diamond that says, if they say yes, go this way. If they say no, go. And it's all over the place, and you can actually end up in an infinite loop. The way our IVR works, it's all dynamic based on what the buyer wants to be asked of the consumer. So they're going to get past the simple greeting, and then the next buyer in line, if he has promptable tokens, we ask them. If he doesn't have any tokens or filters, we're just going to route the call to him. And so once we resolve all of those promptable tokens, the buyer will get the call. And if he fails any of those tokens, he falls off. But what's cool about our system is this makes our IVR dynamic. So there's lots of ways the token value can already be populated. For example, if I had a traffic source that was trying to send me calls to this offer, and he's like, hey, I really don't want you to have the IVR. I already have one. I'm just trying to forward you the call. And I already know that I'm sending you calls that are over 10K and that they have federal debt. Okay, great. So what I could do for that traffic source is I could go to Manage Filters. I pick the traffic source, and I say do not play, not equal to. So if the call came in, play the greeting unless we don't want to do it for Jerry Jones of Dallas Call Suppliers. Okay? So what's happening now, the call comes in, it goes to play the greeting, but it finds out that the traffic source is Jerry Jones. So we say only play the greeting when it's not Jerry Jones, so the greeting will be skipped. And that's why we have this when one is pressed or no key press is requested, because Jerry Jones's calls are not going to play the IVR, so no key press would be requested, and that's why it's going to follow this option. Now when I pull the number for Jerry Jones, I'm going to fill in that his calls are over 10K and that they have federal debt, so that automatically, as this guy, we went to route to 123 lending, we see the answers have already been populated in the number, and we can skip prompting for those prompts. So there's lots and lots and lots of ways TrackDrive can get that data. Either when you pull a number and you put in the extra tokens and fill in what the values are, so you already know what you're getting, or take for example this student loan services form I have here. They're filling out this little form here. They hit submit, and on the thank you page it says, thanks, you'll be contacted soon. If you're in a hurry, call this number. And let's just imagine that this is the number that showed on that thank you page. Now you can see I set up the script on that thank you page to read the form fields and make them part of the number. Now this number would be part of a pool, but it's already populated that they're attending school, they're out more than 6 months, that they say that they're employed, they have federal debt over 10K, and they're late on payments. Okay, so all these tokens are already set from that form fill. If someone called that number and came into our offer, then that's another way that the tokens are already populated, because at our scripting at the landing page, we're able to populate the tokens. A third way to get all of the values already is I could have set this up that this is the only number I'm using on the offer, this toll-free number here. When they hit submit, I post that lead data to TrackDrive. When TrackDrive sees a phone call come in from this phone number, we're going to pick up all the data that you had on your form, and that would pre-populate the tokens so we don't have to ask as we route the calls to the buyers. And the final way, there might be more ways, we have so many ways, is if I had loaded leads up to use our scheduler. The more data you give us on the leads that you load into the scheduler, the smoother the IVR will be as we're calling people from the schedule. So the scheduler is on. You're going to have a regular incoming call offer that you also put a scheduler on. The greeting can play an outbound greeting and inbound greeting, so we know which the direction of the call is. But the cool thing about that is the more data you give us in the leads that you're giving to the scheduler, the smoother the IVR can be, because you may have given us answers to the questions already from a form you got from a Facebook lead or whatever. So it's very cool how this dynamic IVR routing goes based on what we can get from the data population. Now, another cool thing about that data population is a lot of people on our system. There's John Doe sitting in his closet running call transfers. So you find a really good company that's doing phone transfers, let's say even for student loan. Now normally what happens when someone's doing outbound calls and they transfer you a call and you forward it to a buyer but you don't have any data, half of the calls are going to be the consumer saying you called me and the buyer agent saying no, you called me, and they go back and forth about who called who because the buyer doesn't have the data. So on TrackDrive, if you set up your little system where you have a great call center that can transfer you calls, they can transfer you the calls including their part of the recording from before they transferred the call, so they can make that a URL. They send all the data to TrackDrive and then transfer us the call. When we pick up the call by caller ID, we'll grab all that data. So we could have first name, last name, kids' names, vehicle ID number, whatever they've asked for at the call center. The more data they post to us, and you don't have to define what data we'll accept. We'll take anything that's in the post string to us or the JSON script that they set up. But we'll take all that data. It will be part of the call. That data is all available to pass along to your buyer, or have the buyer just logged into his team view and see the current calls they're on, and they can see the tokens of the call, so they have some, they're knowledgeable of who the person is that we're transferring, instead of spending the first 3 minutes of the call arguing about who called who. Okay, so that's basically our fancy IVR and how you can make things do special stuff. Each option you pick on key press and stuff gives you, it's a two-pronged thing. What do we say to the consumer or the caller before we do this action? So most of the time you're going to say, I don't have a message. Sometimes you will talk to them and do something, but the options you're going to have is to hang up on the consumer, to forward it to a list of buyers. Again, buyer groups are cool here. You can forward it to another offer. You can add it to a schedule and then hang up. So, hey, you called after hours, so on this one about no buyers are open, I could actually make this one, I don't have a schedule set up yet, but I could actually make this one say, we're closed at this time, we'll call you back as soon as one of our agents becomes available. And then instead of hanging up on them, I'm going to add that to a schedule. Again, I don't have any schedules. I can also require a key press when I do that, which is really cool. So we can say, we're closed at this time. If you'd like to have an agent call you back when they're available, press 1. And repeat that a couple of times, and then we won't add them to the schedule unless they actually press the button you're looking for. So any button you choose they could press to get added. So otherwise they would just hang up on you when no buyers are open. So that's one of the cool features about our system, is every single option people do, we're given it the ability to say something before you route. Now I just want to make sure everyone knows, I have so many people that don't add a greeting and they try to put a greeting here. So this is actually playing just before it routes. It's not asking them to press a button. These messages that play as part of the routing option are not the same as a greeting. They're something that plays just before we go. Like on this right here, I could say to them, please hold while we connect you to the next available agent, and then it would route along its way. Okay. Other things we have, greeting. If you had to ask for a zip code to be able to route, especially in tort reform offers or insurance offers, a lot of people will get huge insurance companies, even networks, to give them offers to send all the calls for any state and whatever, and then they build their operation by going to find the smaller individual offices that maybe have 5 agents that are willing to pay a whole bunch more for calls from their neighborhood. So we have to filter the buyer to only send them calls from certain zip codes, and so you'd have to prompt the user for a zip code. Again, unless you asked for it here and posted that to us before the caller could call, or we're using the scheduler and you filled in the zip code, this is a prompt here that will also get skipped if the call is is coming in, or it was an outbound call and the consumer's entering the offer, if we're going to ask for a zip code but we already have that in the data, we'll skip the prompt because we have the data. Now this is the enter zip code prompt. You repeat it a couple of times, but then this prompt is the incorrect zip code. If we don't see that the zip code they entered is matching the U.S. Postal Service's zip code list, we'll stay in an infinite loop asking them for the zip code and saying sorry that's wrong, and we'll just stay there. If you had numeric tokens, like if you're going to say please enter your in one of these filters here, if you had a numeric one that you said please enter your mortgage balance to the nearest thousands of dollars followed by the pound sign, or please enter your agent ID if it was a transfer and you need the guy to enter his agent ID, so you don't have a whole bunch of phone numbers. You assign one phone number to this whole call center, but as the guy's transferring his calls over, before he can do it, he has to key in an agent ID. When you're entering a numeric token, you can list all the valid fields or the valid answers that the keystrokes can have, and this token entry failed means, oops, I don't have that in my list. We went over when placed in queue, it's full. No buyers have matching tokens, which would be, we were prompting through the consumer and all the buyers failed, so then we're going to tell the consumer, hey, sorry, we don't have anyone that matches your criteria. We could play a message if the caller hangs up before being connected to a buyer. You can whisper to the agent when he answers the phone. So actually you don't play a prompt here. This might be that you set up a routing option for that. That was kind of dumb because the consumer wouldn't hear the prompt. But when the caller, this option here, I could say, hey, they hung up before a buyer could answer. We are dialing, so throw them in the scheduler and call them back later. The whisper is something you say to the agent that the consumer can't hear. We already went over when no buyer answers. Now before, when I was showing you how in the video what the options were for the buyer edit, there was an option in there that the buyer had to press 1 to accept the call. So these two prompts here are also whispers the consumer can't hear, but this is played to the agent. If the agent, the buyer record, has the prompt that says they have to press 1 to accept the call, so this one will be press 1 to accept, and let's say we called 5 guys. If one answered and we disconnected everyone else would hear, sorry, you pressed 1 too slowly. So these are the two prompts that are played to agents when you have the buyer set up to press 1 to accept the call. And then we obviously have all the key presses you can make. And I forgot to discuss one of them when I saw this when star is pressed. You can do anything though. When the prompt is playing, and we can route based on them pressing any of the keys, or this is when anything else is pressed. That should say else probably, but you had routing options for 1, 2, and 9, and they press a 6. That'll follow the when anything else is pressed. The when nothing is pressed happens when they go through the whole IVR and they don't say a word. They don't press a key. It's going to follow the when nothing is pressed. If they call in and they've been blocked, that message plays. If they press a 7 when we're playing that message, you don't have to tell them they can press 7. But if we're playing the message to them about the block caller and they press 7, that will resubscribe them, and then that message could play. And if we couldn't resubscribe them, like if it was a hard, you can't come back in, that one would play. And then you would never play a message typically for when a traffic source is capped. But if a traffic source was reaching cap, you could do some kind of routing, maybe off to another offer or something like that. You can prompt for enter an extension. So if you're using a number pool that's actually an extension pool, then you'll prompt them to enter you might say enter your, let's say you had a website that had a whole bunch of used cars on it, and you're showing a lot ID or whatever about the vehicle, or vehicle ID, or maybe it's a seller ID. So you show the seller ID. Maybe the seller has 10 cars, and his seller ID is what shows. They'll key in the seller ID, which is in our system a virtual extension, which will help us get that number, and it has to be a valid extension that we showed on the screen, and then they key that in and we know what to do, what's going on with that. The extension would have all kinds of things populated in it, so it's a good way to track things. And if they entered an invalid extension. So these are all of the options we have, but so many things can happen with your setup, and we do these things in a linear fashion instead of making a big graph and you try to tell us what's going on as they press keystrokes. We just kind of think through, when this happens, what do you want us to do? So that's the detail call flow video. Thank you for your time.